members of the committee and other people in the audience to this month's Overview and Scrutiny meeting. The main issues that we will be discussing today are the recommendations from the various working groups that we've held for next year's 1920-21 budget. The report back from the working group regarding the highways contract review and in-year look at the current budget. First of all, can I have apologies for non-attendance? I've already had Councillor Malcolm Waters, who I don't believe there's any substitute advised. I've also had apologies from Susan Zeiss, the monitoring officer, and Sophia will be stepping in, whispering in my ear when and if she needs to. Any other apologies?
Yes, through you, Chair. We've also had apologies for non-attendance from Councillor Breeze. No substitute advised.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2 on today's agenda, notification of requests to address the meeting from members of the public. On agenda item 7, the Highways Service Working Group Review, we have Mr Dave Gaster, who will be given the opportunity to speak when we get to that item agenda. Item 3 today, declaration of members' interests, if any, and declarations of any party whip, if any. I don't imagine there are. No, good. In that case, there's no fire drill scheduled today, so if the alarm does go off, leave the building and return only when advised it's safe to do so. Can I remind members that the meeting is being webcast, so please use your microphone because then it'll kick in into the web stream, and also help the chairman, who's a bit hard of hearing anyway. I'd like to firstly thank all members, both of this committee and wider backbench members of the council, who took part in the various budget scrutiny review meetings that we've had over the last month or two. Hopefully that was a constructive process, but obviously we'll talk more about that when we come to that agenda item. I would also like to inform the committee that Councillor Julie Davenport has formally resigned from this committee now, and I'd just like to thank her for her work both as a committee member and also as one of the vice chairs over the last year or so. Her contribution has been useful, and I'd like that noted. Minutes are item 5, minutes of the overview and scrutiny from last month, 18th of December. You should all have a copy in today's agenda pack. Can I ask the committee whether they agree that they're a true and accurate record and whether I can sign them off? I heard agreement from on board. I will do so. Thank you. And that brings us on to probably the most important part of today's meeting, item 6, the scrutiny review of the draft budget proposals. You should have a separate pack of papers in front of you. Obviously, the recommendations, the draft recommendations rather covered in this paper are the work that we've been doing over the last month or two. They remain the property of this formal committee, so it's this committee today that will actually agree these draft proposals or not. Having said that, I hope that this won't be an opportunity for people to restart the scrutiny. We've already been through quite a lot. I don't imagine there will be too many things that we wish to change. Key themes from that review are listed somewhere. If we look on page 2 and page 3 of that paper, I mean, the first thing I think that we considered was that the draft budget for next year generally does represent a better and more robust budget than possibly previous years, and I think that needs noting. We did also decide that we wanted to emphasise the risks involved with the council working with third parties, be it the NHS, be it other organisations. Clearly, any time we work with third parties, there is always a risk about whether that will impact on our savings proposals, and again that's something that we said we would want to specifically mention. The other point that we, in the working group discussions, raised was the timing of service changes. The budget as it stands has lots of things that will proposals to come online during the next financial year. It's important that that timetable is kept to. Any slippage in that could present a further financial risk to the council if, for example, savings are due to start at the start of the financial year and they don't come until halfway through. That's worth noting that could be a problem. And the only other thing I sort of want to mention that we discussed was the improved engagement with the committee and with the working groups. I think we've been able to scrutinise the budget in a way this year than perhaps we haven't been in previous years, partly because the budget was, the draft budget was originally came out a month earlier, and partly also we've had really good engagement with a lot of the senior officers involved, and certainly the discussions we've had with them I think has been very constructive and useful. James, is there anything you want to add to that before we start going through the individual proposals?
No, Chairman. I think
Great.
you've highlighted and introduced it completely.
Thank you very much. Okay, in that case then what I propose is that we go through each of the items we specifically looked at one by one, starting on page 7 of agenda item 6 from today's papers. We have obviously spent some time coming with these proposals. There have been some changes to the draft since we last met, following our last working group meeting. But if I could go through and invite any commentary or discussions. The first item then is for adult social services on page 7, and this was related to the extra investment in that service to cover items of in-year inflation, or demographic changes, forecast demand, and indeed the rebaselining, putting the money back that possibly needed to because some things this year didn't occur. And on that note, I would like to stress once again that these extra investments, this rebaselining, is just as important as any saving proposals, because if these forecasts go awry, that will have obviously a financial impact just as much as if some saving doesn't come on board. Anyway, first item, any comments about the recommendations? Okay, fine. Well, hopefully we're going to fly through this. And just for members of the public and others that are here, I should stress that the working groups have been meeting over the last couple of months, and we have been through this in some detail. Today is really just to sign off, if you like, our commentary. Page 8 then, the next item, again, adult social services. This was a saving proposals, 770,000 regarding fair contributions policy. The recommendation is that we believe that particular saving to be deliverable. Agreed? Please do chip in with any comments. Item 9, again still on social services. This was the 1.1 million saving from the learning disability area, and our recommendation considers that, again, that savings proposal is deliverable. Cecile.
For the member of the public, they think that we signed off, but we had a long time discussion. We had already discussed 3 or 4 hours, and so today it's the end of the journey.
Absolutely.
So it should be no problem, or if we have a problem today, it's because something
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully
So
I tried to make that point. I do recognise it looks as though we're just nodding things through, but
But it's not the case.
Yeah, that's not the case. Having said that, however, there is an opportunity for any committee members to contribute if they wish. So we're agreed on that proposal. In that case, we come to page 11, which again is with adult social care. This was the 1.2 million contract variation for the Shaw PFI programme, and we did have a long discussion on this, but again, the outcome of that is that we recommend that it is deliverable. Okay. Page 12 then, social care again. This is the 2 million saving, rapid response falls and admission avoidance. We say that we believe that that proposal is deliverable, and also go out of our way to say that we support the approach reflected in this new service. We actually think it would genuinely offer something to residents. Any comments? Graham. Sorry, could you use the mic, please, for the purpose of the webcast?
Yeah. Sorry, I know from the other side that the hospitals are welcoming this as well. They're very much looking forward to be, and the CCG to be in this partnership, and are confident it'll work as well.
And hopefully, as I say, this will be seen as a general benefit. Page 13 then, 3.5 million savings, strengths-based working. Now this is quite a considerable amount of money, and our recommendation is that it, where are we? We're saying that, you know, we're confident that the delivery proposal it should work.
Concerned about this.
Yeah, we do it. Sorry.
Please, Victoria, yeah, because there was more, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. I think it's been captured in the recommendations, but just to make it clear to anyone that wasn't at that meeting, because we felt there'd been some slippage in awarding the contract that's going to deliver this, we wanted Cabinet to make sure that they were aware and kept an eye on it, but also this has been delivered elsewhere with some success, and we wanted the Cabinet to sort of assure us that they'd looked at the other case studies and success stories, and if they felt they could share that with us, then it would be appreciated.
Yeah, very much so. And I think we previously made that point to Cabinet anyway, but yeah. Absolutely. And that is, as you say, covered in the recommendations. Any other comments? Okay, that then sort of brings us to the end of the adult section, and we move on to page 17, children's services. Again, the first item is about the proposed reinvestment into the service to cover future forecast demand and rebaselining. A couple of pages of this. We did have a very long discussion, and we were talking about the importance of the new children's social worker care pathway achieving its intended outcomes, the degree of challenge involved in this service. I think it's fair to say that in children's, possibly more than anywhere else in the council's organisation, it is the most volatile area, and anything that doesn't go according to plan does have potential difficulties. Any other comments? Victoria?
Yeah, I think it's just we've put here recognise the importance of the new children's social worker career pathway, is that we really wanted that to be robust and to sort of keep us informed on how that was progressing, because it's the success of that pathway and its impact that is going to deliver quite a large amount of the savings and bring some stability to the service. So it was just, again, stressing to people that weren't here that we felt that was really important for us to keep a track of as well. Yeah,
certainly, and I think in year, both the Cabinet and this committee will want to very carefully monitor the performance of this, because, as I say, a small slippage could have knock-on effects elsewhere. Page 21 brings us to a couple of savings proposals regarding foster care and in-house foster carers. Recommendation is on page 22, and again we're sort of confident that these proposals no, we're not. Oh,
we're not confident. Sorry.
Okay, so we've got
crucial difference.
yeah, sorry. The committee is not confident that the full saving of the proposals will be delivered, and therefore we're flagging that up, I think, as a concern to Cabinet.
Yes, and through you, Chair, of course, that applies in this case to two proposals because there are two distinct savings relating to the foster care area.
Okay, any other comments? Victoria, please.
Yeah, just again, clarity on that. We very much agreed with that as a strategy, that had to be done, and it was the right strategy to have. But again, it was just a deliverability. So it's the right thing to do, and it can achieve those savings. But again, we just want to keep an eye on it because in the past we've had some slippage.
Okay, and I think the same is true with the next proposal, page 23, improve children's outcomes. We're saying, where are we? What are we saying? Sorry, Chris?
Second recommendation.
Yep, we are concerned about the level of risk to the full delivery of this proposal. Some savings undoubtedly will be managed, but whether it comes in full is a question, and we're questioning the robustness of the 588,000 figure, and again highlighting to Cabinet that it really needs to be confident about this before it proceeds, and of course that it should take in-year monitoring very seriously. Any other comments? Okay. No problem. Page 27, we move on to place. And again, the first item is around that extra investment to make up for any sort of suggested shortfall, if you like. And we did. We considered this reasonably well considered, and think that, you know, that will probably be achievable. Any comments? Okay, then we come on to the specific proposals. Page 29, for example, we've got the delivery of road maintenance, where there's expected to be a £500,000 saving. We were quite strong on this one, actually. We felt that this should not proceed due to the risk that it will have regarding unintended consequences that outweigh any benefits of the saving. This is the highways maintenance part, road gritting, etc. Any comments? Okay, and remember, all of these will go to Cabinet and give them a chance to re-look, reassess and report back any further feelings that they have. Page 30 then brings us on to the home to school transport saving, 650,000. Again, this is one we had concerns about, and that we're not confident that a full saving could be raised here, or not the full saving that they're expecting. And again, that's something we'll be flagging up to Cabinet for them just to take a second look at. Any further comments? Okay, and then page 32. Bus lane enforcement, £500,000 plus income that they're expecting from new bus lane monitoring and enforcement. And we're saying that we're confident, or we're asking rather, that the Cabinet should ensure that it is confident before this goes ahead. And again, this could be one of those examples where the full saving isn't achieved in year or in the time that it's expected, so any slippage could potentially add to the need for financial mitigation. Any comments? Okay. Page 35, moving now on to corporate services. We looked briefly at the proposals around the customer service area. And again, we're asking that the Cabinet make sure that it is confident and won't add any changes in that, such as reducing the opening hours or whatever, won't have unintended consequences, which again could outweigh any potential savings. Okay. In that case, can I ask committee, are we...
The leader, I need a quick word.
Oh, sorry, of course, yeah. And well, I do apologise. Welcome Barry Scarr and Matt Golby, leader of the council. Matt, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through these comments in full yet, but any initial comment you have would be welcome.
Thank you, yeah. Well, I've had a brief look, and obviously I've noted with interest what you've said this morning and made a few notes myself. So you know, I put the challenge to Scrutiny at Counter to say this is the last budget we're going to be scrutinising. Let's do the best job we can. And I think you've done a pretty good and thorough job on. You've pulled out the areas that need looking at and identified them. And you know, we note your recommendations, so I'll take that back and discuss them with Cabinet. One of the challenges and one of the things we've tried to do this year is to be as robust with it as possible, and I know the officers have certainly done that as a part of the whole transformation and the route to local government reform as well. I know it's not just our officers here, but some of the other 151s as a part of that wider team have taken part in contributing to the you know, the budget process this year. So I think this is the most robust set of proposals I would say this council's had in a very long time, and certainly welcome the input from Scrutiny.
Okay, I appreciate that and welcome the fact that you'll be looking in detail at some of our comments. It's fair to say this committee is a cross-party committee. Individual members may have their own thoughts on some of these proposals, whether they're actually desirable or not, but of course we've tried to focus on our commentary on whether your plans will be delivered. Michael.
Yeah, I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, that we all have our own hobby horses and particular areas of interest in the budget. As a former portfolio holder for highways, I went out of my way when the budget was launched at Cabinet a couple of months ago to draw attention to the chronic need to do something about the roads, and I would emphasise, as the council leaders here, our reservations on this 18006 targeted delivery of road maintenance, recommended it shouldn't proceed, so I would like just to underline and emphasise the importance of that while the council leaders here, for Cabinet to look at that very seriously indeed and hopefully to reverse it.
Okay, and I'm sure the leader will take that away, share it with his Cabinet colleagues and, well, respond accordingly, however they feel fit. Hopefully they'll agree with us, but we shall see. So, committee, can we agree? Chris?
Just before we do, Chair, just to echo your point, the one about, whilst we may have said things might be deliverable, that is no recommendation of desirability, and we'll all have our own views on various things, so I'm happy to agree with you there. I just wanted to looking at paragraph 4.3, specifically on page 3, the third of the report, the third bullet point about timing of service changes, and just to emphasise something that I feel is really important, and I'm sure that the Chief Finance Officer agrees with this one, is that if there is any slippage in any of the savings that are adopted when in the budget in due course, or indeed if any pressures come forward in service areas that haven't been anticipated, any mitigation cannot be by one-offs, must be some sort of ongoing mitigation if the slippage or the pressures are ongoing, simply because we cannot at the end of the financial year pass on a deficit position or a position where savings need to be located to the new authorities, because we'll be setting them up to fail on day one. I'm sure everyone's acutely aware of that, but I don't think it does any harm to emphasise the point. Thanks, Chair.
No, I agree. Balancing next year's budget obviously is the priority of this council, but Chris is absolutely right. Depending on how that is done, could potentially have some future implications. Cecile, then Graham.
Yes, I think we should also be a bit more optimistic, because some of us were there previous years and so on. So this year we had a much more robust scrutiny, and we had 2 months to do it. So therefore our doubt and so on, there is always risk when you deliver a budget, but the risk is because we are changing the way we are delivering, and some of the savings are for better services, like, for example, the fall service. That is good news. So a lot of the risk are due to the change, a transformation, and it would be better for our residents, and we know it's a risk because it's new, but for our residents it will be a better services at the end. Thank you.
I totally agree with the fact that this budget has been a better process than in previous years. Hopefully that's picked up in the items on page 2 and 3 of the report, and also my previous comments. Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Stanbridge covered a little bit of what I was going to say, but I think it isn't mentioned in the report. Perhaps we should have put it in, but we have been mindful all the way along of the what we leave for the unitaries, and it has been something we've discussed and had in our mind, and that's particularly pertinent, of course, when we talk about the full-year savings, because the timing is very important. Perhaps we ought to add in the report we have been mindful of that, and we are aware of the consequences. But I can assure the public we have considered that all the way through our meetings.
That's a good point. I mean, it is something we've discussed time and time again. Possibly we could put a sentence in into 4.3 in those key themes, just to reassure both the public and the Cabinet that has always been at the back of our mind. Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On that very point, that I've talked about since I became leader. And as our administration we've got to do everything we can to put the finances for the county council in the best place possible as we transition towards unitary. And I think we've demonstrated that that's exactly what we're doing. And the robustness and the quality of the way this has been put together is, frankly, the best I've ever seen while I've been a member at this place. But it all goes towards honouring that commitment as a collective group of members across party, that we're leaving everything in the best possible place we can. And of course, critical for this coming financial year is how we monitor and track those savings, because they've got to bear fruit and and be delivered, because the last thing we want is to set the new unitaries up to fail. That's not what we're about, and it's certainly my job, and Cabinet's as well, to put the challenge to the officers and make sure that what is said is going to be delivered will be delivered, and I'm very confident in the process that we've got around that to do exactly that. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to take that assurance, and I've no doubt that every member of this council realises the potential as we move towards unitary. Nonetheless, again, I think it's probably still worth putting in a line there, and Chris was absolutely right. Even though the budget as a whole may balance, individual departments may be able to mitigate some of their actions, but if that is done by one-off mitigation, it could potentially bring a problem. Victoria.
Yeah, just on that, I'd like to ask Cabinet to bear in mind that what would be really useful for scrutiny is that the figures relating to this and the ongoing position, I'd really like to get that presented to us and offered to us. Sometimes we have to ask for it, sometimes we have to chase it. So if I give the example of foster carers, it'd be really simple if we just got an update every month on our net position with a bit of dialogue around it, rather than having to ask. If it's related to this budget, as far as I'm concerned, it should be a KPI, and we should just get it as a matter of course and that is happening more, and I'm aware that there are changes to make that happen, but I just want to make that official, that we should get the information so we don't have to ask the questions in the first place, and only comment then if we feel that if it's drifting. Thank you.
And certainly the in-year monitoring this year, we've had discussions about the information and the regular updates we may or may not receive. But yeah, next year, the last year of the county's council, probably even more so. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Briefly, just sort of following on from Victoria's comment there, that we have had difficulty getting the sort of information, the kind of detail of information that we have wanted. But having said that, we've had officers here who have given huge amounts of time, when they're very, very busy, to come and talk to us. And what we are doing here, has to have the support of the officers too, because they're the ones that are going to be delivering it. And especially Democratic Services, I think they've done a splendid job right throughout this process in providing us with, the materials that we're working with. So I'd just like to sort of, give a bit of thanks to all the people, the officers that are working on this as well.
And I'm happy to formally note the response and the help we've had from officers, especially Democratic Services. There's no way we could have done this without their support. And regarding the ongoing issue, particularly about children's, which is the most important area for us to look at, the information we've been received, we have had and are having ongoing discussions about some of the technical nature of that, and I'm confident that that will improve in the short term. Any other comments before we agree? Okay, can I suggest then that we formally agree these recommendations? And James.
So, Chair, that will be the recommendations as written, subject to B, agreeing the headline themes from the Budget Scrutiny Review as set out in paragraph 4.3 of the report, with the addition to the headline themes of a point about the overview and scrutiny being mindful during the Budget Scrutiny Review of of local government reform, the transition to unitaries and the legacy that NCC leaves.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Could we just agree that, or do we need to go through some sort of council formal proposal and seconder? No, we're agreed, yeah? Okay, thank you very much, and again, thank you to everybody, not only members of this committee, but other councillors that took part in this process. Hopefully, what we're passing today up to Cabinet will genuinely be of use and help inform their future deliberations. Okay, thank you very much. That then brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7. This is the Northamptonshire Highway Services Contract Scrutiny Review. You will remember that some time ago now we set up a working group from this committee to look at those issues, and I'll be asking the chairman of that working group to comment on his report, which is included in today's documents in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, however, I would like to ask Dave Gaster, member of the public, to address the committee for up to 3 minutes, and hopefully we can follow that by a constructive discussion around the reports. Dave, could you, if you come to the end there, and if you press that microphone button, hopefully your light will turn red, and hopefully everybody will be able to hear your comments. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Scrimshaw. I have 3 questions in addition to the wider observations that I have sent to officers, the author and chair of this committee. Question 1. Has the dire lack of management information been addressed? Clearly, bridge inspection recommendations have been missed. Street doctor reports not acted upon. Section 58 inspections recorded that are statistically impossible. Gullies neither inspected or cleansed. The systems that are in place in NCC can be interconnected at relatively low costs. A similar set of databases were linked in another council. The Keir contract director at Surrey County Council recommended that Keir here should speak to me to replicate those achievements. They declined. Has the rapidly increasing backlog of repairs been evaluated? Does the Council know the difference between future required works against available budgets, including areas such as Section 38, new developments? Will this be reported to the 2 new unitary council shadow cabinets or commissioners? And finally, what is being done about management and leadership? Clearly, significant wrongness has been allowed to prevail, tolerated by the contract design. I've been told that the letters that Mark Morell, Mr Pothole and I wrote to the Chief Executive in November 2018 were deliberately replied to by officers giving the Chief Executive wrong information in those responses. However, since the new portfolio manager has been, portfolio cabinet member has been involved, Jason Smithers, I have seen significant and meaningful improvements in the way that things are inspected, repaired and addressed. I do believe he is trying to make a difference.
Okay, thank you very much. Possibly we'll be able to pick up on some of those themes in our discussion. I suspect it will be the Cabinet's response to those questions that will actually be more important to you. And of course, this report, if we approve it today, will go to Cabinet. And just to stress then that this report is from the working group of our committee. Of course, the ownership of the final report before it goes to Cabinet lies with this this full committee. Having said that, there's no point in, if you like, having a dog and wagging the tail itself. I don't envisage necessarily any huge changes to this report, but I do want to encourage a discussion, and hopefully we will be able to ask the working group for any details or any clarification of points that members may have. But on that note, Jonathan, as chairman of the working group, could I ask you please to make comment on the report that you're presenting to us today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, what I'd like to say is that on the first page of my introduction, I didn't add a certain area which I'd like to add now for the record, is that I'd like to thank various other members of highway service providers, some highway service experts. Important comments, though, were by the members of the public who took their own time to contact me, and indeed some of them visited me to highlight their own personal concerns and issues that they have experienced within the highway structure of Northamptonshire. And I'd like to thank all of those people for taking their time out and coming to see us. Mr. Chairman, it was a difficult working group to actually cut through a lot of information that was provided initially, and we had to set a basis of where to go. As you know, initially there was certain accusations made at the delivery of the highways contract, some of them which could probably have a legal implication. Those concerns, Mr. Chair, I understand that we referred them straight away to the leadership and to the Cabinet. And then ultimately that went to, as it should do, is into the audit side to have a look at those. So I can actually say that those accusations were not part of our working group because they did not constitute any of the areas that we were looking into directly. However, Mr. Chairman, we were looking at the deliverability of the highway services in Northamptonshire. I had a very good team working with me of members and officers who provided quite a substantial amount of information. And as you see in the report, the impetus really laid on the management structure of the deliverability of the services into Northamptonshire. And that's where we found the main issues were. Not necessarily on the work hasn't been done, whether the work has been done properly, or the quality of the work. It all came down from there. So we took that on board, we looked into it, we looked at the methodology of how it was working and how it was being delivered, we looked at the management structure and how it was working and how that was delivering it, and how that was overseeing the deliverability of the contract, including the SLAs. As you see in the report, Mr. Chairman, we've made a number of recommendations, and hopefully I understand that some of these actually have already been taken on board because we highlighted concerns ongoingly, and some of those have actually been implemented, I believe, in the creation and the, shall we say, the procurement of the extension contract that will be put in place soon. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions or any clarifications that people require.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. Can I just confirm 4.2, you speak about looking at the original service contract with Kier and also the original and indeed revised service specifications. Can I just confirm you were able to actually look at those documents and that was part of your consideration?
Yes, Chair, and as I reported in other overview and scrutiny meetings and committees that we had, we did have a slight, shall we say, difficulty in obtaining all the documents and all the information that we required on the onset. But I would just say that I think that thank you for the tenacity of certain members and the tenacity of officers into ensuring that we received those documents. Ultimately, we did. And that was especially that we looked at the OPS report, and then we also looked at the KPI indicator handbook, and we also then had the actual original contract that we looked through. whereas those contents are obviously sort of very, shall we say, intense in their wording, to say the least, the gist was there. And as I was saying, the deliverability didn't seem to be the problem so much. It was the accountability and deliverability of the service, and obviously the management of it, which is where we highlighted in our report.
Yeah, I think one of the themes coming through this report is questions about how the contract is currently monitored, and certainly you make several recommendations to that, but it seems, if I understand you correctly then, that those recommendations are based on an informed position following the looking at all that various evidence.
It was, absolutely it was, and it was pleased to hear that before even the report coming into draft thing is that the should we say the management of place had actually were very active in getting inspectors out there and starting to inspect work that possibly should have been inspected earlier, but have still got a programme going into place and continuing that now. So that has actually already started to be progressed.
Okay, could I, before I throw it open, just ask two more questions then? Dave Gaster spoke earlier about the increasing backlog of road maintenance. I don't know if you've got any idea what that currently is. I mean, that is something that certainly would be of interest, but you may not know that. And equally, you may not know, you mentioned that certain things have been passed over to the audit committee. Do you know if they what position any work or action that they are taking is?
Certainly, as with the backlog of certain things, and Mr Gaster directly mentioned one specific item, which was the gullies, and the washbacks, I think, or what they call it, which is basically how the water on the highways is removed. There was a slight issue that we found that was basically actually from the Environmental Agency, where they prevented if for want of a better word, but if people can remember when the old machines used to go around there and suck all the gullies out and wash it back, all the water and the debris that was collected has to go somewhere. And the normal thing was to empty it off into landfill. However, the Highways Agency showed a huge concern about them doing that. Not only in Northamptonshire, it was countrywide. It wasn't just here, it was across the whole country. And for a while they banned it. And then they were saying that they had to put bunds in, councils would have to build bunds, filter the debris in the water before it can go and be released back into the land. However, they've now removed that ban, and I would say, like to say, normal circuses have resumed. However, there was, I've been told that there was a huge amount of backlog, especially around the gullies and other areas, that they're trying to catch up on now. That the numbers were reported, I think, at the last overview scrutiny by the lead on place, which is Councillor Smithers, and I will say that is ongoing. The numbers are dropping. However, you've got to do a lot of work to catch up, and as well as you've got the ongoing maintenance as well. But I will say that it's in progress, and they have now sort of got another plan in place, and it will continue to drop. Going on to your other question, Chair, with regards to sorry, can you just remind me again, sorry?
The audit. The
audit, yes, sorry. As it's going into audit, of course, we're overviewing scrutiny, Chair. We can't comment on the progress of audit on some of this, although I have had conversations with the Chief Head of Audit, making sure that we are on, I don't veer into his area, and likewise that we don't cover the two things off on the same thing. So we have had discussions. Concerns that we've had have been relayed to the audit, but of course the outcome of that is at the time we're not at liberty to have access to.
Yeah, that's really what I was asking, just if you knew where they were procedurally. Right, any... sorry, Dave Gaster, you want to come back in?
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. When I was referring to backlog, I was talking about the backlog of highway repairs. The official information that we have seen through FOIs before showed that the backlog was going up by something around 17 million per annum, which was up to about 2 years ago. I believe from observations, seeing that particularly since the condition before intervention occurs has been made deliberately worse, and then the intervention takes longer to be repaired, that the backlog of repairs is probably increasing by something like 30 million a year now, or £600,000 a week.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things then, mainly around Jonathan's last comments on potential flooding risk as well from blocked gullies, because we know that in our towns and villages that that anything from straw and all other debris always comes flooding out of the gullies every time there is any heavy rainfall. So right from villages where that happens, it can't be acceptable that all that debris then flows back into the storm drains or and goes into our watercourses. So I'm glad that that ban on the landfill option has been lifted. In our towns like Corby, culverts are very often not cleared and causing much more serious flooding problems, where even whole roads are inaccessible. I'm thinking about a part of the central part of the town in Councillor McGee's division, where there is a serious flooding on a biannual basis there. Around the Lidl supermarket on Gainsborough Road, and that's down to non-clearance of gullies. So that is it is an ongoing issue. So thank you, Jonathan, for raising that both as an additional comment but also in your report. My other main point is around compensation for legal and insurance claims, and it can never ever be good value for money for a council to be paying out more in insurance claims than it should because of the state of its roads. And I'm so disappointed that Northamptonshire is up there in the top 10 of the most expensive councils in the country, where we're paying out more in compensation than we should, and where it's not the top of the league that that's not a league we want to be high up in, and I'm disappointed by that. I don't know if Jonathan wants to comment on that, whether the working group did actually have a look at that in any detail, but it is mentioned on page 22 and 23 about the legal and insurance claims, and that this is billed as a secondary risk. Well, actually, I think it's up there with a significant financial risk and also reputational risk.
Thank you. Jonathan, I think you want to come back to that, and then I've got Chris and Graham afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. With regard to the potholes, which is quite ironic, is that when you talk to most people around, it's the concerns with their bins being emptied, and the potholes are the two sort of, should we say, number one and number two. Which way round it all depends on what time of the year it is. Potholes. Yes, I mean, that was one of our main real dig-ins and concerns. We did go onto the NCC website and look at how the website works with regards to classification of potholes and explanations to members of the public, so they have a better understanding of what does actually determine what a pothole is and what isn't. As regard to classification, it was very, should we just say, ambiguous at least. We looked at it, and I think we was as confused as the next person to how it worked and how to understand the different depths and widths and, the angles and the times and what road it is, whether it's a B road, an A road, a major trunk road. It wasn't very clear to us, and we were looking at a specific area. So member of the public who just has an issue, go on there. It wasn't it. So one of the things we did was we actually did talk to the Highways Department and see if we can get that changed, reassessed, and then put back on the website in a different format. And I understand they have done some work on that already, Chair. And basically it is the defining amount is what constitutes a Category 1, Cat 2, Cat 3 or Cat 4. On the website it was an emergency Cat 1, Cat 2, I think, where's the other classifications. So that has been changed, I think, or it will be changed, and then they'll be put in a more specific classification on the web so people have more of an understanding. And of course, going along with whatever the category is actually as attained, which then, as you're saying, if a member of the public goes over a pothole or damage to the road and they report it through to the road doctor or whichever way they do it, they can do it in many ways. They don't even have to go through a particular portal. They can just send an email to the Highways Department or even a phone call to lodge that concern or complaint at the time. That should work. And then we've asked them to look at it if it's not working properly, to make sure they put some changes in place to ensure it does. Once that complaint has come in, then somebody will go out and look at that incident, and it should be done within the first 24 hours. It will be classified. If it needs to be as an emergency or Cat 1, it should be repaired within 24 hours. Then it goes down to Cat 2, whether it's a 7-day. Then it goes to a Cat 3 and a Cat 4. And it all depends on the size of the hole, where the hole is, what part of the highway it is, which road it's on, what the classification of the road is, if it's a back lane or a main trunk road. There's lots of parameters in there, which then will categorise on when it gets repaired and how it gets repaired. We've asked them to re-look at that. We've asked them to actually review that and then come back with some better ideas and make it a lot easier for the public to understand.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation, and we await to see how your recommendations are put into practice, and hopefully they will bear in mind those comments. Chris.
Thanks, Jay. I've got a question for Jonathan, and then I've got various comments I'd like to make. So the question is regarding on page 22 of the sort of main pack that we've got today. There's reference towards the end of the second paragraph there that talks about there are 2.5 full-time equivalent staff members managing the highway services contract. And I'm interested to know, what are these the people that are doing the monitoring of the work that Kia are doing on our behalf, or are there other people doing that monitoring, and if so, how many of them are there?
They're sort of like, basically, they're looking after the whole of the contract. But although they're looking at that, there are extra members, there are other members of staff, there's an administration team, and there are now inspectors going out, which are in addition to this, ensuring that the work's being done. So what they do is basically they're now starting to follow possibly the next day. They get the week's work order through, and then what they will do is at random, they will go out to different sites the following day, or even the same day, to ensure that the work's being done and has been done. And then they'll come back and report to their management team.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so clearly, the working group had a concern, because you've made recommendations about it, that our in-house function for inspecting the work done by our contractor was not, maybe is not, sufficiently robust and sufficiently well staffed, and if there's anything that is taken forward out of this review, I would hope it is that if we're paying millions and millions of pounds to a contractor every year to maintain our roads, then we need to ensure that they are doing the job properly, and we need to have the staff in place to do that, because just for instance on the insurance costs issue, we've put in place what we think is a highways contract that will protect us from insurance claims, because we've engaged a contractor who will maintain the roads to certain standards, and if that happens, then we should be able to defend any insurance claims, and clearly that isn't happening because insurance claims are being paid out. Not only that, we've opted to bear the cost of those insurance claims, which I find surprising. It may be an industry standard that happens, but you might think that it ought to be the contractor that bears the cost of those insurance claims. But there we are. We're there with that one. I just wanted to pick up on some other things, Chair, if I could. Councillor Brookfield talked about flooding in Corby, and I think very generous, saying it's only a biannual event. Recently, it appears to be every time it rains that Oakley Road and Gainsborough Road get flooded. So much so, for instance, on Gainsborough Road, there is a row of houses that have sandbags outside them permanently to protect them from flooding. And whoever is responsible, whether it is gullies not being cleared out or grills becoming blocked, and that might be an Anglia water issue with there's a particular river there or stream that actually goes underground for a part of its distance. That's something that ought to be addressed. It's something that really shouldn't ever happen. So let's hope so. Let's hope that there can be some work on that. I was interested on the point that was made in the report around the efficiency and effectiveness of the work that's done, and that's something that concerns me greatly, because I have constituents come to me and they, having had stretches of road reported to the county council as needing some attention, they say, oh yes, we saw some people there the other day, they came round, they put barriers out, they did some work and they went away again, but they only did half the work, Chris, and they left some of the potholes, what residents consider to be potholes, unfilled. And to me, if we're talking about efficiency, the major cost of repairing a stretch of road is getting a team there to do the repairs in the first place. Then you have the marginal cost of the materials they put down while they're there. And it just seems to me to be huge common sense that if, you know, a road is in a bad condition, do all the repairs while we've got the machinery and the people there, which is the major cost, using some extra materials if necessary, rather than leave half of them or some of the repairs that people consider need doing because they don't quite meet the criteria. Oh. So there's actually some repairs being done in my division today. I passed the diversion this morning, and I'm almost sure, and it pains me to say this, that some will be done and some won't be done. And I'll have people phoning me saying, why did they come and do this and only do half the work? So we shall have to see what happens. On the communication issue, Chair, the point has been made about enhancing communication with the public. Again, major issue for me, Fix My Street. Works quite well, but you report, say, for instance, a zebra crossing needs repainting because the white paint has faded, and you get back a response from Fix My Street saying, yes, we'll do that on our programme, and it will be done in due course, and you know, maybe some time period is alluded to, maybe it's not. Well, if there's a programme, that implies that there are some dates programmed in for when work is being done. It's not done at random. They don't just put all these things into a hat and pick out one place and go, oh, we'll go there today. So why not tell members of the public when a particular area is programmed in when they respond, so in order people have the full information? You know, it improves communication, it improves confidence in the service, Chair, that you know, people will see the work done and they'll know when it's being done. You know, because nothing worse than being told something might happen at some point in the future, but nobody's really sure when. Let's tell them when. And finally, much as I feel quite brave saying this now, Chair, there's a recommendation here that the NCC should consider protecting and prioritising the budget for highway maintenance. And yes, I can understand why that recommendation has been made, but my recollection is when the Cabinet Member for Finance was asked about that a little while ago, he said something along the lines of not going to happen. So you know, maybe it will, but maybe it won't. Anyway, thanks for allowing me to rant, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan has indicated he wants to sort of come back on that, and then I've got Graham and Michael and Bob. Also, Dave Gast has indicated he'd like to make a comment on that particular thing. I will come to you and allow you this time, but I mean, technically now this is a discussion within members. Jonathan.
Thank you again, Chair, and thank you for your comments, Chris. The easiest one is the Fix My Street comment to come back to first, is, as we're saying, when we asked that the whole of the process of reporting and having feedback from repairs is to be reviewed, and I'm hopeful and I'm pleased to say that they've taken that on board, and that will be part of the review process, I'm sure. I will actually talk to them and make sure that we add something like that to it, which we can do as we keep going on, Chair, for this, because obviously we're going to be reviewing any kind of outcomes and the results from our report in due course to see if anything has been taken on board and any changes that we can report to. As to the traffic management issue, and when a team rocks up to fill a particular maintenance issue, a pothole, yes, that was raised, Chris. It was raised, especially the fact is when we have expensive traffic management in place, where you have your traffic light system put up, possibly over whatever distance it is. It could range from anything from 30, 40 yards to 300 yards. And the question there is, well, why don't we repair every pothole in that area while we've got that management in place? It's cost. Basically, it came down to cost and how much it will cost to actually do it. You probably heard yourself, as I'm sure, you know, I mean, Jim's nodding and Mike's nodding here, is that some places you think, why don't they just scalp the whole road and relay it? It's cost. They don't have the budget for that. The budget they have is for repairs and maintenance. So what they are saying is that although these defects are being categorised, yes, Cat 1s were put down for like within 7 days repairs can be done, and they're saying they're going to take that on board and start doing that. So they will go the whole length of it if there's traffic management in place and repair all the Cat 1 defects that are there. The lower category defects, ironically, it sounds that they're probably not too much of an issue at this time. Common sense will tell you to fill it in so it doesn't become an issue. However, it comes down to costs again. And that's especially for places where they don't have traffic management, is we have to ensure the safety of the workforce as primary. So it's okay if you've just got a team working behind a little van. In certain areas, you can't achieve that safety properly. So they can do a certain area where they've got the risk assessments in place for it. Moving on, they might have to have a different set of risk assessments. Although common sense will say to you, if you've got pothole here and then you've got one 5 or 10 yards away from you, you know, do the same thing at the same time. But where do you stop that? If you carry on doing that, the next one, the next one, the next one, you'll be shutting the road down and doing them all.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And just on one of the things you mentioned there, members will see that one of the recommendations is to sort of revisit this in 6 months when we come to the recommendations. I've got Graham, Michael, Rob and Cecile. I'm keen for members of the public to have an opportunity to address the committee. So I will very briefly allow Dave one more time to, he wanted to answer one of the specific things from Chris, but then I do want to go on to the member discussion.
Thank you, and I will stay silent after this. Just on the flooding and following on from gullies, last year less than 30% of the amount of gullies that should have been inspected and emptied were actually done, less than 30%. Where those have been causing problems, where I've been reporting them, I have actually reported specific areas that should be jetted out, where the council have then gone and jetted out the drains as a result of non-emptying. Recurring flooding has stopped. So if you know the right question and you put the street doctor report in the right way, you can actually stop that recurring. And the reason that the drains fill up with silt is because the gullies themselves overfill with silt and then it flows down the drains. You empty the gully, you've still got a blocked drain. As to repairs failures, I've been reporting a lot of work since July. Some of the curb repairs that have been reported by me in July have failed within days, been repaired and failed within days. They are not being repaired in a way where the workmanship, materials, specification or technique is fit for purpose. Triple failure within a few weeks should never, ever be possible. And lastly, things like road markings, where they have been carried out by the council after doing other work, have failed within 3 or 4 days, started to break up, lift off the road. I've reported those and they've said that they will look at them in due course, but they're happy that they fail within days and they don't come back on those in spec. I find this appalling.
Okay, thank you again. Obviously, we don't have professional officers here, unfortunately, to answer those specific questions. But you know, I'm sure we'll all bear that in mind. Jonathan, you want to say something very quickly on that? And then I have got members desperately waiting to ask you some questions.
Thank you, Gary. In a direct response to Mr. Gastor's concerns there of recurrent repairs in the same areas, that also was highlighted by us within the group, and we've discussed that at length. And there is a process, I believe, that is going to be implemented, or if not, has already started to be implemented, is that when our inspectors are going out there, they're monitoring what is being done, and if a certain defect has, should we just say, is recurrent, and they keep going back, and then we get another, if you like, to one page, if we get another invoice for the same job, then we're asking questions why, and they are going out and picking them up. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in the future, is that that will become a thing of the past where we're paying for the same repair multiple times. And that's not just, as Mr. Gastor's highlighted, on curbs, it also goes on to the pothole and the road repairs as well.
And a lot of this will depend on how the executive treat the report when they get it, and we look forward to that.
Absolutely, Chair.
Councillor Norman has been waiting very patiently and giving me loving looks, so please.
I'm not sure about the second bit. I'm always conscious that this is the one service that affects all 740,000 residents of the county. Whereas, and of course it's unfortunate, it's always the service that gets hit when other statutory services overspend, and that's part of the issue, and it's very difficult to know how to protect against that. And obviously, if you have conversations with people in the Ds and Bs, the coming merger and unitary, this is one area where I think they're all hopeful that we'll be able to improve, particularly when in conversations with planning. So we perhaps look forward to that. The committee was assured that there have been some recent improvements, as has been mentioned, certainly in the inspections after work has been done, and in the instructions to crews to try and make sure they didn't go back to the same road. So the committee did receive assurances on that. Having said that, it felt like that the council had got itself into a place where Keir were not just judge and jury, but also prosecution and defence, because we were really, and so it's very important that the recommendations in the middle of this report about increased scrutiny of the contractor are enacted, and I think that is underway, and it is their intention. Because being able to ensure that we get value for money is the heart of everything we've done in the last couple of years, and I think that's also one thing that's not really been touched on, but one of the issues that they have is the actions of utilities, who are a law unto themselves, and I've been, we were all assured that they were taking a much stronger line with utilities in making sure that they came back and did proper repairs in the right materials in some places. And I think also we're assured that the and I think that the investment is being made into new machinery, new ways of treating this to make it more efficient and to make sure that we're doing it in a more timely fashion. Funnily enough, Councillor Stanborough mentioned zebra crossings. I've got one I reported on the 20th of September in the town centre that isn't done yet either, but I think that's probably because A, it needs a road closure, and B, the weather's not great for painting lines. Having said that, I had a road, I took the CLO down last Wednesday. Monday morning they were there repairing the whole road, so you know, that they had done. Just one small point in the report in section 4. I think there was another meeting later on. I think the new director, Neil Taylor, was at that meeting, so I think we have to add him to the evidence gathering section, because he came to at least one meeting and contributed. But other than that, our brief was to look at the management report, and I think the director is aware of what we're saying and in sympathy with what we're saying, and proceeding along the lines of improving the service.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think your comments about Keir acting as judge and jury are very valid. And I hope, and this is really what we have to decide today, I think that actually does come out as a theme of the report. We need to ask whether we are confident it does so. I have Michael, Bob Scott, Cecile, Jane, Wendy. Michael.
Yeah, just to be as brief as possible, Mr. Chairman, given the number of people who want to speak. I want us to focus, or like Councillor Eakins, to focus on one word in particular, which hasn't been used a great deal in the context of the way this budget is deployed, and that is waste. One thing people at grassroots level will not forgive councillors or politicians for is wasting money. And I'm afraid highways maintenance and waste come closer to one another because there is a lot of evidence of where eventually the contractor comes out to repair long overdue potholes that look like moonscapes and things of that nature. And if I could put a plug in for Chapel Lane in Hackleton, I'm sure the people there will be grateful for that. I've been trying for about a year to get some work done there. But when highways contractor comes out, Keir do a job, and it fails within a period of months, What is the procedure for debiting the contractor for the cost of having to do it again? Is there a mechanism in place? If there is, I'd be glad to hear it. But perhaps Councillor Eakins could comment on that. It is long overdue that we get it right first time. This is an old adage in business. You get things right first time, then you don't need to do them again. Regrettably, Mr. Chairman, and particularly in the rural areas, which I represent, where work is done by Kier, the contractor, it looks good and looks fine for a week or two, and then after a period of weeks and months, it starts to dilapidate, especially where it is subject to pressures from agricultural vehicles. And note should be taken of that by the contractor. If you're in an agricultural area, the farms right, left and centre, it's clear that tractors and agricultural vehicles will be using it. So the pressure on that repair are going to be far more than they are perhaps in the average urban area, where it's mostly cars and light vehicles. I got plenty of evidence that work has had to be repeated, i.e. taxpayers' money has been wasted because of the repeat procedure. We should be concentrating on getting it right first time, but perhaps Councillor Eakins would comment as to whether there is a mechanism in place. Nothing concentrates people's minds more apart from death than having to pay out money. And if they're paying out money, or the council has to pay out money where there's evidence of potholes not being maintained and people damaging their vehicles and axles and this sort of thing, which is mounting, what evidence do we have that the contractor is being debited for work which is not fit for purpose? Thank you.
Jonathan, before I move on, are you able to comment specifically on that?
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you very much again. Yes, there is. In bluntly, there is a scheme in place of doing it. They do get funding. It's a percentage-based scheme. So, as I was saying, is that the contract does get monitored. It's either being more stringently monitored or stringently monitored now, as it has been previously. As I said, it's a percentage, and I think, if I'm 100% right, it's a percentage of their invoice value in a period. So if you have a lower invoice value in one period, then the percentage is lower against if it's a higher one. So there is one in place, and they do get fined, and I do understand that it has happened, and we have got recovered back from there. It's another thing, it's all about the monitoring, and it's judged on whether they reach their KPIs or not, as well as if they're continuing going back and then their repairs are failing and it's being picked up on, then that comes back to them as well. So the answer is yes, there is, and we can get some more details to the overview of Scrutiny Committee if though required.
Okay, appreciate the clarification. I'm happy, obviously, for any non-committee member, councillor, to contribute. Bob.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the group that brought this report to the committee. I did one some years ago on a similar subject. There were a lot of things we put in it and that weren't enacted on, and I suspect we might see the same again. But the reason I wanted to speak was because, like many councillors, the report I get from members of the public is nearly always on the subject of potholes having to continually being repaired. And the streets that it happens on are always the same streets. And it's down, really, I think, to the materials they use for a patch. They have the facilities to do permanent patches with a machine they bought in originally about 3 or 4 years ago. But they don't seem to use it. And if they use that sort of technology, it should bring down the number of repeated repairs that they have to do. Perhaps Jonathan, I know, has spoken a bit about this, but not fully. And in terms of the monitoring period, and looking at monitoring the consistency of this, they don't seem to have done it in the past. So why are you sure they'll do it in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan's indicated he wants to reply.
Absolutely. I think the vehicles that you may be talking about are these thermo patch repair vehicles now. I don't know if I'm going to be overstepping a mark here, but I understand that we're in the process of procuring 3 of these vehicles for the county, and they will start to be implemented and rolled out very soon. The reason why we can be confident that these patches are going to be permanent or semi-permanent, watching my words, is the fact that they use very high temperature and they go across the actual patch that needs to be done. And I believe it could be something like about a 2 or 3 metre square patch. It heats up all the tarmac around it to a certain high temperature of melting point. The patch then is put in, and then with the heat it's cured, or they compact it again and cured, and then you almost get a brackets seamless repair. The proof is in the pudding. All I can say is that. But what they're saying is that it may well increase the speed of patching. I'm not going to really put me in the head and block and say how many, because it all depends on the size and the depth of patches, but quite considerably. They probably can do at least 3 or 4 times more a day than what they would do under normal circumstances if they were doing individual ones. I'm pretty sure it could possibly more than that, but I'm not going to commit to the numbers at the moment until we prove that it works.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the procurement of vehicles, I've absolutely no idea whether it's possible or not, but I hope consideration is being given to possibly electric or low emission vehicles, but I say it may not be possible.
I think with the temperatures involved, I think the eco side of it won't be actually achieved.
Sissy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Gasket came here and made some comment, and I don't doubt his comment, but we had no officers to come and reply. Now, I would like to speak on behalf of the officers, because it's a complex, highway is a very complex matter. Now, I am one of the most rural patch in the constituency. I live close to Leicestershire, and it's true that highway is in my mailbox the subject that I have the most. Now, I have been a councillor for 6 years. I have established a very good contact with the highway officer who represents my patch. So what we do, every month I call him for 10 minutes and I said, where are the problems you think in the patch? That is what I have, and we have a very good discussion. Now, the point I would like to make is that I know my patch, I have very small road, and it is true that agricultural vehicle destroys the highway in a way that we have no idea, because we don't have curb. So therefore, as soon as they start to erode the road, there is no way that it can be stopped, except that at vast cost. So we have to be very wary of what we are asking highway to do. I quite agree that potholes are dangerous, and in fact, the coroner will say so very often in certain cases. But we need to be wary of thinking that highway can repair everything. We have a very old infrastructure, and we need to be efficient with the money we have, because it's not fair. Now, I have my other point of my bugbear in my inbox is not the repair, is not, and a lot of people find the officer very pleasant. I have 2 bugbears. First, a lot of the public is always fed up because they see 5 or 6 officers looking, but in fact it's because of officer and the risk they have, because people never stop when there is a roadwork because they are in a hurry and so on. So it upsets everybody. And secondly, when they have to make a claim, they find that the way we can make a claim by the council is very, very difficult. So I have a plea, and I don't know if Jonathan can help me with that, that if for a reason, and a motorist might think the pothole is responsible for his wheels that has buckled and so on, but could we have a look at the way the claim can be done, so like that it is fair for everybody. It is fair for us because we don't have spurious claim and people don't object, but it's also fair for the motorist that he doesn't feel that he's not he has to send so many waste so many times that he gave up. And after that, we have a bad name because we are not proactive. So I hope if you could take that on, that would be. But I would say that all councillors, we have an officer who is responsible for our patch, and I always find them very, very useful. And we should not. We should be a bit more thankful for the work they do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's fair to say that individual council members, whether they represent rural or urban areas, all have a whole raft of issues around potholes, both locally and collectively across the county. You spoke, Cecile, about efficiency with money. I hope that that's, again, one of the themes that comes out in the report. There's lots of talk about the need to get value for money, which I think is covered by that. I've got Jane, then Wendy, and then I want to try to draw this to a close, depending on any further comments. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Jonathan, I may have missed this in your report, but there's no mention of pavements.
It was discussed.
It was discussed.
We used it as a, if I may, Chair. Pavements, in fact, actually, believe it or not, pavements and footpaths have more accidents reported than actually roads do. Within this county and other counties as well. So it is again another countrywide thing. But yes, pavements were included. I think it was Graham's comments of utilities.
Yes.
Because that was discussed at length. The fact that, if you like, most of the damage, brackets, is on pavements is caused by utilities digging up and going across them and then repairing them, but not actually carrying out proper repairs. And there is a part of the investigation team, or our team, inspection team, are picking up on them. And yet again, yes, we are going back to utilities, and yes, we are now implementing fines, as we can do, which is, I think, it's a standard. We can levy fines and costs to them, and we are starting to process that as well.
Quick supplementary on that. Is there an inspection schedule for pavements? Because I mean, I've had elderly residents with the most horrendous damage to faces, arms, knees, as a result of trips and falls. So is there an inspection?
Absolutely, and likewise, as I said, because the accidents are a lot more because of the trip hazard. And the categorisations, again, each, shall we say, incident or each report is categorised again. It is on the website, but as I said, we've asked that to be reviewed to make it a little bit more user-friendly so the public can understand the difference in depths of what constitutes whatever category it is, and then they will go out. But yes, I have people that I know as well, friends I know, that have had accidents and broken arms, especially the elderly, including my father-in-law who broke his hip. However, you know, not every, shall we say, category is actually comes up as a reportable issue, unfortunately.
Can I say, I think you're doing sterling work, Jonathan, answering questions almost on behalf of the portfolio holder. I appreciate we are going slightly out of the remit of your work, so well done. And I must admit, when we talk about road maintenance, I always assume it means public highway, which also includes the footpaths and pavements. But again, valid point, and this is one that hopefully we can take up more with the portfolio holder as we move forward.
Chair, if I may, a lot of these questions that are being raised here today were actually at meetings where the portfolio holder wasn't in attendance. These were actually concerns that were raised by the members on the committee.
Which just shows the level of work that you put in, perhaps. I've got Wendy and then Jill. Wendy.
Just going back to optimising relationships with utility companies, Jonathan's just touched on what I was going to say, actually. It's not just reviewing those relationships with a view to taking opportunities to raise income from fines. A lot of the time, the highways aren't actually put back and repaired like for like, so they should be putting right what they've dug up, and there should be some enforcement to ensure that that has taken place after any utilities work has happened. And with relationships to the highways officers in our divisions, I'm sure we've all got good relationships with them. But the problem that exists, I think, is that they are spread too wide. They cover such a large area and have such a vast workload. It's the time then that it takes to get back to you. but other than that, I've found them very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Valid points. Jill, and then I want to try and bring this to a conclusion and sort of move on to the recommendation. Jill?
As I was on the working party, it's useful to hear everyone's comments, and I'd just like to commend the whole report, in particular the monitoring, as we've said, is a very big part of it, but obviously all of it comes down to money, and continue to see the highways budget eroded, savings made perhaps through vacancies or not being filled, but we felt we really needed to prioritise highways because it does affect so many people in the county, and it can be very, very dangerous as well, some of these potholes, and so that's why we didn't lightly say about keeping the budget and ring fencing, because we felt that it needs to be a high priority.
Good point. Okay, thank you very much. I think, I mean, one of the reasons we're looking at this issue in the first place, of course, is this committee has a remit specifically about finance, and clearly there are, places where service delivery and finance go hand in hand, and this, of course, is one of them. The points that have been raised, I note that the Leader of the Council is still here, and one would hope that he also is taking notes, and this is something that will feed back through to his Cabinet meetings. Can I come back then to the report, to the recommendations? I haven't, I don't think, heard any suggestions of adding or changing or anything, although it's been a useful discussion for members. I've got James waiting to come in, then Jonathan, but we need to decide if we're happy with this report, and also the recommendation that once it's gone to Cabinet, we will obviously receive back their comments and, of course, follow this up ourselves 6 months from now. James, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There was one relatively minor amendment, which was to add to the Chairman's introduction the thanks for the members of the public who'd contributed information.
Absolutely. Okay. Jill.
There was also the new interim head of highways to add.
Yes, the point was made, but if I could direct members to paragraph 4.5, it is mentioned, and the fact that that gave an opportunity to have to engage with the new director is there, just in a slightly different place to where it mentions the other 3 meetings.
Okay, Jonathan, you wanted to...
Yes, Chair, if I may, just finally. I'm very grateful to all the members and the members of the public here today that have come here, not only just to listen to what we've carried out as a working group, but also for their input and the questioning, and hopefully that some of the answers we've given them have been reassuring. What I have taken the liberty to do, Chair, and we acted a little bit proactive, is I've requested a follow-up meeting with the head of the Highways department and the portfolio holder, that I can share these questions and concerns that have been raised. I too have been making notes, as the leader has as well, as you indicated the leader has as well. So I think there's no harm in us having that meeting and then just following up and saying, look, these are really the highlighted points. We want to ensure that what we've discussed, what you've given to us, will be carried out, and give the assurances that it will be. So it's just a little bit of a follow-up with them afterwards for their work as well, and they need the input, so I've taken the liberty to do that, Chair.
Okay. Assume everybody's okay with that then. The recommendations as listed on page 27, that this report goes as is with the small alterations that James has mentioned to Cabinet. Obviously, we will then receive Cabinet's response, which I think will be an opportunity for us to consider this again, but specifically we will 6 months later revisit this whole issue to see how things are going on. Do I have agreement from the committee? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We will move on then, if we may, to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, the delivery of the in-year 1920 council budget. I have Barry Scarr, I think, who wants to give us a brief overview. We're basing the discussions around this on the latest position as far as we know it, which will be from the January Cabinet report. Prior to this meeting, there were some of us that met obviously, which was open to all committee members to go through that report. Following that, we did ask rather a lot of, dare I say, detailed questions around some of the smaller items in there. The idea of that was to try to get understanding of some of the detail before, hopefully today, having a discussion about some of the bigger things. As yet, I don't think we've had a response on those that list of smaller questions, but of course all members will be circulated in due course. I'm waffling on. Barry, you want to make a broad overview?
I think, Chair, if we cast our mind back to earlier in the year, we had quite a significant overspend, and the position that's been reported in this particular report represents cumulative improvement, which brings us to a small overspending position, and we're fairly confident that we can bring this into a balanced position by the end of the year, Chair. And with that, happy to take any questions on the report. Okay. Just to remind members, although you should have the papers in front of you in today's agenda, from memory, the current overspend that we're looking at is down to £500,000. And we did speak, didn't we, last time we discussed this, about how we're all pleased and happy that it's done that, but it is kind of weird that we're celebrating an overspend nonetheless. But it is a massively improved position than previously. One of the questions that I particularly have, and I did flag up to Cabinet that this was an area that I wanted to particularly follow. The overspend, we know there's an overspend in children's, top of my head, 7.4 million, although the budget overspend as a whole, as I've said, is down to £500,000. So that children's overspend has been mitigated by various things, some of them one-off. For example, again, top of my head, there was just over £1 million that came from the closing down of Olympus Care, which, again, that's a one-off figure, which we won't get again. But a lot of the Cabinet report was talking about savings that have been made across the organisation through staff vacancies not having been filled. And I do wonder whether some of those staff vacancies, for whatever reason, that haven't been filled, have in turn put pressure on the existing staff, i.e. they've got more work to do because there are staff vacancies, and therefore we can use the wages that would have been spent to mitigate those overspends. Whether that in itself is contributing to some of the original saving proposals not having been met, i.e. are the staff too busy? Is that why some of the original proposals, haven't been able to work on and haven't sort of contributed? So, if you like, we've got this sort of vicious circle: saving proposals not being met and being mitigated by the staff wages, which isn't being spent, but that's contributing to the other. Hope that makes sense. And I don't know, Barry, whether you are in a position to comment on that, or whether that's something we need to address with particular service heads. And I've got a few people willing to speak after that. Thank you, Chair. I think, as you've said, the major overspending item is children's services, which isn't dependent upon any vacancy savings whatsoever. In fact, if anything, we're applying above establishment on agency staff to try and stabilise the service. I wouldn't say that the staff vacancies in children's have led to overspends within that particular directorate.
Sorry, say that again. You're saying that some of the saving proposals aren't causing a pressure in children's?
No. What I'm saying, I think what you're saying, Chair, is that the staff vacancies might have led to non-delivery of savings because of pressures on other staff. I don't think that's the case in children's at all.
Okay.
Yeah. The major vacancies are within Adults and Place Directorate, and I can't speak on behalf of colleague directors.
Yeah, I appreciate that might be a more detailed.
But I can't see any evidence that vacancies in Adults and Place have led to non-delivery of savings.
Okay, although clearly the amount of vacancies that we're holding does potentially add to future problems. I've got Jill, Michael and Cecile. Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two concerns. Page 36-37, emergency planning, often called one of the Cinderella services. Now, we're at a stage with this new coronavirus we don't know what's going to happen with it. We don't know how serious it's going to be, but it's one of the major issues that I'm sure will be concerning emergency planning. So I'm concerned on page 37, seeing forecast underspend due to staffing, as you just indicated, that if you have vacancies, you're obviously not able to do as much in terms of work, and that public health spending has been removed from this service. I'm concerned because obviously this is a public health issue, and I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to flag it up as an issue. And the second issue is also on page 36, as it happens, the auditors. We just seem to, they spend an awful long while auditing. I'm sure that's essential for their work, but I just wondered if there's some oversight of that, because obviously the longer they're spending doing the audit, the higher the bill is. So I'm not quite sure who audits the auditors.
I think the overspend in the audit refers to the 17-18 budget, but that overspend presumably comes out of this year. Okay, any other comments from Jill's question?
I think the emergency planning thing is a fair point, and you recollect that we've allowed 1.4 million in 2021 for investment in key services, which I think the emergency planning will be the recipient of some extra funding. I can give assurances that the public health budget in total hasn't been cut. The Council's public health budget is the same as it ever was. It's ring-fenced for public health issues. And the auditor's fees, whilst it is quite a substantial amount of money, you'll recognise that the Council's risk profile is higher than most councils, and whilst we pay a higher fee, we've got to agree that fee of the auditor in public sector audit appointments, and we do question the value for money and the extent of the bill before we agree to pay it.
Okay, I've got Michael, Cecile, Chris. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to change the topic to reserves of the Council. We were culpable in the previous guise for raiding reserves and reducing them to virtually zero, which contributed to the 114 notices in previous years. I see on page 56 of the report that we have certainly recovered remarkably from that dire situation. However, I do note that the actual reserves position as April last year was 40 million in total, general reserve and earmarked reserves. That is forecast to actually drop a couple of million to 37.9, 38 million by the end of the year. Could you, one, confirm that that is probably going to be the position? Secondly, could you confirm that that is, in your judgment, adequate to cover the risks of the Council? Bearing in mind, I think there is a target of 40 million we are hoping to leave to the two new successor councils in a year's time. Bearing in mind the portfolio holders often expressed view that given the size of the operation, the turnover each year, our reserves should be in the region of 100 million.
And presumably the current position of $500,000 overspend, if not addressed, would be met from those reserves as well.
As you say, the reserves position has dropped due to use of the budget delivery reserve, which was set aside to do what it says, help deliver the budget in the current year. Within the budget amount, there is an existing contingency of 2.1 million, which hasn't been applied to any of the service overspends as yet. So by the time we get to the February Cabinet reporting cycle, we'll be taking a view on how that contingency will be accounted for within the budget, and potentially that could be applied for the bolster reserves, but that will be reported in February Cabinet cycle.
So a budget sorry, Michael, just to follow this, if you don't mind. So a budget contingency line is effectively a revenue base line budget to meet any contingencies, which is sort of the same as reserves, only it doesn't progress each year moving forward. I just wonder how that relates to, you know, this being the last year of the council. Presumably they are very close and interconnected, because it's the same sort of money, isn't it?
I think contingencies are in the base budget as an
Yes.
ongoing budget. And again, committee will recollect, as part of the budget proposals for 2021, we've actually increased those by 2 million. So contingencies will be 4 million in 2021, just to, again, stabilise the budget position and manage that uncertainty. Reserves are one-off in nature.
Yeah.
And can, once they're gone, as we all know. So, yes. So the main difference between contingencies and reserves is contingencies will be there every year as an ongoing budget provision.
Yeah. Although next year, of course, it won't be this council that are deciding the level of that contingency. That's
and,
what I was sort of trying to...
And the councillor is right in terms of the level of reserves, but I will be addressing that in my Section 25 report for the 2021 budget in February Cabinet and full council, as to the adequacy of reserves and the robustness of the estimates.
Okay. Sorry, Michael, I sidetracked you. You want to come back?
The comment about the contingency, this is invisible. We don't see this in the monthly report, do we? My question about, in your judgment, the adequacy of this level of reserves, it's coming out at £38 million. Is that, in your view, adequate, bearing in mind the risks that the council has, and bearing in mind, moving forward, what we expect to leave the unitary authorities?
As you've said, Councillor, previous reports have identified that a benchmark for an authority of this size would be 100 million. Can we get to 100 million by next year? Certainly not. I fully expect reserves to be 40 million or just above 40 million by 31st of March 2021. But that is where we are in terms of a level of reserves, and we will have the amalgamated district and borough reserves coming into the north and west councils as well. So they'll be there to add in. I think, you know, as I said, I'll be making my position clear on the adequacy of reserves in the Section 25 statement in February. But it will be down to the individual Section 151s of the two new unitaries to make their judgment and position on that as well.
So in your view, they're not adequate at the moment?
I didn't say that, Councillor.
I would. Cecile.
Yes, Jill touched about the coronavirus. This morning on Radio 4 was very good, because it compares the coronavirus with the SARS virus, and they hope that it will not have that the contagion can be limited. But we don't know, because we didn't have a pandemic now for 18 years, and public health always say that we are due a pandemic, and apparently up in the coronavirus. Now, could we have the reinsurance, because we don't have a crystal ball, but we would soon know if it has the impact, because it has made all the news. Could we be reassured, because that can have a huge impact on our budget if our officer cannot work, if we have with the hospital, our social services and so on. Can we have a reinsurance that if something of a magnitude arrived in England, we will have a plea for central government to help us with that, because that might have an impact on our budget? Could I be reassured with that? Thank you.
Okay, I mean, we need to, I guess, sort of focus on the actual budget we have, but that is, of course, that's an absolutely valid question, which I know Barry wants to contribute on.
I think an event of such magnitude, if it became a pandemic event, would be dealt with at regional and national level. The local resilience forum would kick in, and whilst we would have an input, it would be coordinated at a much higher level than this council.
It is interesting to see how China are responding so, you know, massively, aren't they, in a way that we probably never could. But we're getting off track. Chris, you've been waiting to come in.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just picking up on the subject of reserves and noting, Barry, your wish not to comment on the adequacy or otherwise of the current position, but also your expectation of perhaps 40 million by the end of 2021, and maybe should be more like 100 million for an authority of this size. And that's not unreasonable, I think. Why is it, as detailed on page 49, especially given the assertion in paragraph 4.2 that the council continues to be committed in delivering a balanced budget without the planned use of reserves, that NAS as a mitigation item are using £292,000 worth of reserve replenishment no longer required. Now I get that that's because the capital dispensation, but surely if there was a reserve replenishment in the budget and we had the windfall of the capital dispensation, we should still put the £292,000 into reserves. Wouldn't that be the prudent thing to do?
I feel as if we're almost a committee behind where we should be here. I think this will be made clear in the February monitoring report, and that will link into the Cabinet report for 2021 as well. Earmark reserves, whilst we haven't balanced the budget using general reserves, which we would never do, earmark reserves are there for a purpose, and the budget delivery reserve was there to deliver the budget. I think how we treat that and replenish reserves will be revealed within the February Cabinet report and the 2021 budget report.
You make an interesting point. However, if we're ever going to look, stop and take a photograph, if you like, of the in-year position, clearly we have to use the latest figures that we have, which are the January report, at any time. I'm sure there's another report due with some changes, but we can't really comment on that at the moment, can we? Sorry, Chris, you want to come back, obviously.
Yeah, and I have a second question, and I fully understand your answer, but the Chair's point, I think, is a good one. You're speaking to us with an advantage over us in that you know something of what's going to be in the February Cabinet report. We don't, so we have to work on what we do know. And on that basis, then, paragraph 4.2 in the report we've got in front of us talks about directorates to continue to identify further options for cost reduction and the maximisation of income streams to address residual forecast overspend position. When these recovery actions are confirmed as deliverable, they will be incorporated in future finance reports to Cabinet, and I've no doubt we might see some of that in the February report. So this report was written for Cabinet on the 14th of January, so it was published sometime before that and written sometime before it was published, so that particular line may be 3-4 weeks out of date now. Are you able to tell us whether further actions exist and whether any of them currently, as we speak now, are considered to be deliverable, please?
Further actions do exist, and I expect that by the time we get to period 9, the revenue position will have improved further.
So there are actions that are now considered to be deliverable, which are going to be incorporated in future reports. Jeff?
I guess one thing we might wish to consider, again, going back to the overspend in children's, which is 7.4 million as of the January report. In fairness, we know that that's always been a volatile service, but in fairness, that figure has, that overspend, huge overspend, has remained relatively static over the last couple of months. So, whether we have any confidence that that overspend will remain the same and therefore able to be mitigated by the items in the report, or whether we feel that it could alter in the last couple of months of the year might be a valid question for discussion. I mean, what we've got to do today, I guess, is to comment on the January report, on what we where we think the position currently is and how confident we are whether it will alter significantly. And I'd be more than happy to get any comments from the committee around that. Cecile?
I think our Section 151 officer have answered to the question you asked, and now it seems that we are second-guessing. It will be a cabinet in February where further saving will have been made. So I don't understand the gist of where you are going at the moment, Chairman.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, what we're trying to do as a scrutiny committee is to look at the current financial position of the council. What we can't really do is constantly say, well, we'll have to wait till next month, we'll have to wait till next month.
Chairman, we are there to, if we have a specific point, but our Section 151 officer has answered the question that was asked by Councillor Stambra, and I think now we are, it's not it's not, for me, the process is to make sure that the officer deliver what they say they will deliver, and you had that said. So now, except if you have serious doubt, and so far you said you are quite happy, I don't understand where we are going. Thank you.
I agree with you that an answer received to Councillor Stamber's specific point about one item in the budget, but we are being asked, because it's our role as scrutiny, to consider the wider implications of the Northampton County Council's finance, and this is members' opportunity to comment or otherwise. Okay, no comment, so I'm assuming... Oh, sorry, second. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, really, I think reiterating what I was just saying is, you know, whether we can see or consider any potential risks that could affect and it is a positive trend in the budget. It has improved throughout the year. It's really whether we, you know, see any risks that could come along, or we are confident that the position as outlined in the Cabinet report is likely to be the final position. And I am getting the mood that actually we are. I mean, that's interesting, because, yeah, winter snow that may or may not be on its way could potentially have, certainly would be a risk to that. Chris?
Bit tongue-in-cheek, but you said, are we confident that the position as outlined in the Cabinet report will be the final position? Well, no, I'm not, because I think it's going to improve. And I'm pretty clear from what the Chief Finance Officer is saying, that it is going to improve, and he knows how it's going to improve, but we're not at liberty to know that information
which
at the
sort
moment,
of does
Chair.
reiterate the difficulty we have in when do we look at, you know, any second, you know, when do we look at this position?
I think it's not.
But, sorry, James.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Perhaps the current position is not the best way of describing it. It's the current direction, the current trend. Clearly, there remains work. What you've got at the moment is a forecast position, and that will develop to get to the final outturn position. But there's a positive direction, and the committee seems to be of the view that that will continue to be successful.
Yeah, I agree, and I've already said outside this meeting that I'm absolutely confident that this council will balance its budget this year, no question about that. £500,000 overspend, which by the sound of it is improving as we speak, will be met one way or another. The question is, you know, how will it be met? I mean, there are some one-off things that may have implications for next year, but that doesn't mean that this year will not balance. Barry, you wanted to come back in?
Just to emphasise, Chair, that we're not complacent about the position. Very much aware that winter pressures or a complex children's case could actually introduce pressure into this budget. We're monitoring it regularly as we get towards the year end, and making sure that if that does happen, we will have mitigations for the 2 months that are left of the year for that to feed through into the budget. But as I said, we're not complacent about a position. We're constantly monitoring.
And I think that's probably a position about those risks that is understood by this committee, although we can't second guess what may happen, of course. Whether the council is resilient enough to deal with those risks is something we have to consider, and unless something dire happens, you know, along the lines of the Chinese thing you were discussing, I think they probably are. Jonathan, you wanted to come in?
Yes, Chair. Just I'd like to make one final comment, and I think it's a bit sort of what Councillor Michael was saying, and Barry's reply as well, is it's reassuring to know that despite us trying to achieve that we balance the books for this year and also for the final year, which is 2021, is that we've still got one eye on ensuring maximum reserves are then allowed to be carried into the two unitaries as seed money. And I'm pretty sure that I'd like to say is that the Ds and Bs have also got one eye on that as well, to ensure that the stability of the two unitary councils in their onset is achieved.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, even if the £500,000 overspend were dealt with from using reserves, which it clearly could be, that wouldn't be a good position, you know, because we do need to make sure reserves are as much as they are. Right, in conclusion, unless anybody's got any other comments, we are fairly confident that the improved direction of travel, which has continued this year regarding balancing this year's budget, is good and probably going to achieve what it set out to achieve. However, we recognise there are, of course, some risks to that, probably from factors outside our direct control. Any other comments that people want to add to anything? Okay, then James, you able to finalise any comment around that?
Yes.
Can you put that into council language for us?
Certainly, Chair. That's what I'm paid for.
Indeed. All right, thank you very much.
Through you, Chair,
Yep.
just so I'm clear, you're identifying that as a conclusion from the discussion. Will that be communicated just by being circulated as a resolution from the committee, which is all that needs to be done, to be frank?
Yeah, I'm happy, and executive, obviously, cabinet will pick it up that way. I would also still like, however, to follow up the more detailed questions we put in. I appreciate the effort that puts on council officers, but I do think it helps committee members get a general understanding of how things work financially, and sometimes it's those details that sort of make us able to comment on the big stuff, which hopefully we just have.
It is being worked on, Chair.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. That then brings us, and thank you, Barry, especially for attending. That brings us then to, I think, the final item of today, which is item 9, overview of scrutiny work programme. James.
Thank you, Chairman. This is obviously the standard report on the agenda, which enables the committee to take an oversight of planned work to deliver it's the remit given to it by council, and also updates you on responses to previous recommendations. The position around planned work is relatively open at the moment. Clearly, the committee has just concluded 2 significant pieces of task and finish work around the draft budget and the Highways Services Contract Scrutiny Review. It hasn't got any specific areas of business identified for upcoming formal meetings, so there is scope for discussion across this meeting and across the committee's pre-meetings about the work programme in that respect. And then just to talk about the responses to previous resolutions. A number of information requests around the Chester Farm project arose from the committee meeting at the end of December. They've all been responded to. And then at the end of page 77, the letter from the chairman to the cabinet member setting out the committee's conclusions on the Chester Farm project. That has now been sent, and a response is in progress and can be circulated to all members when it's been received. Otherwise, Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, James. We've got a couple of items that we've already suggested the committee might want to look to in future topic areas. However, we're meeting next week anyway to set the next agenda in our pre-meeting. I'm more than happy to have a more detailed discussion and come to some conclusions at that meeting, unless other members have anything to add. Jill.
Just wanted to get clarification. At 5.2 mentioned the LGSS joint working party. I just wondered if there was any update on the meetings of that, or the LGSS itself.
I mean, the LGSS Joint Scrutiny Working Group hasn't met for some time, and we, as far as, unless anything has changed, then we are still waiting for the LGSS Joint Committee, aren't we, to come forward with their comments. But James.
Yes, I think I would back that up, Chair. I think the task for the Joint Scrutiny Working Group is linked with there being a clear way forward to scrutinise, and I would hasten to add that I'm in no way cited on the detail of this or work in progress. But yeah, until there is a clear task for scrutiny, there is no logic or work that would require the convening of a working group meeting.
But any proposals that do come forward regarding LGSS absolutely should be looked at by us.
Can I just ask if the committee itself has met? I don't know if it has or not. The LGSS committee. Not our working party, but the one that we would need to basically...
I think there was an LGSS joint committee meeting in at the tail end of 2019, although I'm struggling to recall the exact date.
I've got Graham waiting to come in, but Bob, as a member of that committee, can you just...
Yeah, there is a committee meeting called for, I think it's the 28th of February is the next meeting. There hasn't been one since, I think, about September.
Okay, so maybe by the end of next month we'll be getting a feel for what, if anything, scrutiny needs to do. Graham?
Well, Bob was going to just said some of the things I was going to say. That I was at the similar meeting, and the governance arrangements will be potentially changing such that there won't be a need for the same scrutiny committee. It'll be done differently, and I think that was mentioned at the previous meeting anyway. I was just going to say that in terms of future work programme, obviously we have to keep an eagle eye on children's services, in particular the set-up of the Children's Trust, as and when, and areas such as foster care and things that are in there, and regular updates on transformation, obviously, because that is, though I know there are going to be some member briefings on that, so that may cut across what we need to do, but of course that's now becoming more and more imminent. So those are two things we perhaps...
Yeah, and I think those areas we have already identified as something we need to look at, and yeah, we can have a proper discussion at the pre-meeting next week whether exactly how we're going to do that, i.e. are we going to do that as our next topic or not. Okay, so if everybody's agreed then, close the meeting, and the pre-meeting is next Wednesday, 10 o'clock. Look forward to seeing you there. Sorry? Oh, in the Kobe room. All right. Thank you, everybody, for attendance, especially the people around the side, commissioners and the leader in particular. Thank you.